What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. I have come to the conclusion that the future of games like World of Warcraft and other MMOs is actually more single-player content. And I know that might be a bit of a hot take, but I hope that you'll stick around and hear my thoughts on this and what I actually mean by this, and why I do believe that having more solo progression can actually enhance the game overall. You know, I've been playing this game for a very long time, and when I was younger, I had very strong opinions about WoW, and really about anything, I guess. I think that's something that you do when you're younger, and you learn not to tie so much emotion to your opinions or your perspective, because that stuff changes as you get older, as you experience more in life, and that also applies to video games. Games like World of Warcraft, for example. You know, when I was younger, I had very strong opinions about WoW being primarily a social experience. I believed that WoW was meant to be played with other people, and if you didn't want to do that, why would you want to play WoW? Because at that time, I was part of a large guild where I had a lot of friends that really enhanced the experience for me. And not only that, they enabled me as a visually impaired player because they understood my struggles and were able to compensate and help me learn the game, and took me much further than I had ever gone before in the game. So I owed a lot of my enjoyment to other people. Back in the day, I hated the Dungeon Finder because it removed the incentive to find people to play with, and I noticed that in my experience was becoming less social because people didn't need to be as social. But over time, I've come to understand why things like the Dungeon Finder are extremely necessary, because frankly, a lot of people just don't have the time to sit around waiting to find people to play with. And I think that playing Final Fantasy XIV helped me to understand that, because Final Fantasy XIV has relatively simple dungeons. There are mechanics that they get progressively more difficult, but that game isn't as punishing. And I think that's something to talk about with WoW, and something that I've come to realize when I play WoW. Like, WoW's methods are a little bit too punishing for random groups. You're using this system to expedite your grouping process. You don't know what you're going to get. It's always random, and you're kind of at the mercy of your group mates, of what the random dungeon is going to provide. And sometimes you're going to get people that don't know content, they're new to the game, or you might get the opposite, where you get people that are extremely good, or they at least think they are, and they have very high expectations of everybody else. And that creates a very volatile environment, especially when you add punishing gameplay mechanics or systems that aren't being addressed. And that creates an ecosystem that can be very toxic, and that is something that people complain about a lot in World of Warcraft, both in retail and in classic, and I've personally experienced it myself. People will get kicked for, like, the City of Echoes. You know, there are these holes in the spider webs, and I've fallen through them. You know, I'm visually impaired. I initially didn't see them, and now I know where they are, so it's not a problem anymore. But initially, you know, you didn't see it coming, literally, and so you fall through, and people, you know, they flame you for the stuff like that, even though those holes are clearly there to trap people, to trick people. And so if you're new, you might not notice it. And that's something that a lot of people have experienced in the game. It's designed for that purpose, and people can't help it if they're new. There are just people that have crazy expectations, or they take for granted that they once had to learn the content that other people might just now be learning. When you have ambitious dungeons like the Dawnbreaker, the one where you're flying on an airship and you actually have to mount up in the middle of an encounter and get away, and also just kind of navigating where you're supposed to go in the dungeon, because it's not exactly linear and you have to go with your group. So, you know, there are things like that that are, you know, more mechanic heavy, and learning certain encounters that are kind of not familiar, that cause a lot more friction in Dungeon Finder and creates a lot more toxicity.
It is time to stop pointing fingers! Finger pointing gets us nowhere! Steve!
Like, one of the reasons why I think that having solo content like Delves, for example, where you can progress your character, do harder content, learn things at your own pace, it's a nice break from that grouping system. What's really changed in my perspective is that I don't view MMOs as these games where you play with other people. I view them as games where you play alongside other people. Rather than making grouping up mandatory, I prefer the idea of making it an option. Something that you can encourage, but you don't force. Because I think that if you create an environment where people choose to group up, then you are creating what's most likely going to be a more positive experience. Because if you force people to group up, they don't really want to. They don't really want to play with these other people. They don't want to be social. They don't want to coordinate, but they want to progress. Then that creates a more hostile experience, especially when you add punishing systems on top of that and encounters that are very mechanic heavy, because you have people that don't really want to coordinate. They want to get through it as quickly as possible and never see their group mates again. That's unfortunately how a lot of people play World of Warcraft and other MMOs. They're just trying to get in, get out, and get the reward. That's all they're there for. And so if you create a situation where they can achieve that without having the group up, then that takes care of them. But also it enables people who do want to group up to be more open to what's necessary when you group up, which is being social, coordinating the encounters, and working together. And so if you can do that, and you can allow people to have an escape from that group system and remove the people that don't want to be a part of the grouping system, then what you're going to have left are people that do want to be a part of that grouping up system, and that creates a much more social experience and a much more positive experience when you are working with others. When I was playing classic WoW, for example, I did a lot of things by myself, but there were times where people would voluntarily group up together to achieve similar goals. And those were always very positive experience, because we didn't have to group up, but we chose to group up and we worked together to get things done. And that was always nice, always friendly. People were always cool. Likewise, during the Pandaria event, when we were, running those dungeons and leveling up super fast, we were so powerful that the dungeons were really easy. So even though we were grouping up with random people, there was rarely any friction because the content wasn't very punishing. It was actually quite easy to get through, and people were fun and people were nice. So my point being is, I don't think that you can combine random grouping system and hard punishing content and have a consistently positive experience. It's like whenever I play Overwatch, for example, it's a team-based hero shooter, so you have to play with other people. It's necessary. And if you don't have friends to play with, then you're going to have to group up with people. And look, I've played a lot of video games in my day. I haven't played some of the more notorious ones, but Overwatch, in my experience, is one of the worst communities that I've ever played a game with. It's consistently pretty toxic. I would say that every other game, and sometimes every game, will have at least one really nasty person. And that's just consistently a problem, So, you're always at the mercy of what the random, group system is going to give you, not only as teammates, but also as opponents. And that just creates a very volatile, environment for a game experience. And so while you kind of learn that, while it might be more beneficial to have chat on, text chat, and also be in voice comms, because the community is so bad, you actually learn that maybe it's more beneficial to not do any of those things. That's unfortunately a reality of the game, not necessarily because of the game, but because of the players. So that's just kind of what it is. But in a game like WoW, where grouping up is still something that should be there. It should be a prominent aspect of the game. Providing more solo content can alleviate some of that pressure and some of that volatility in the group setting as well. And that's why I think the future of MMOs is actually more solo content, because creating an environment where you're not having to play with other people, but you are playing alongside people can be a very appealing experience, because you can choose to group up with people, or you can just play by yourself and progress at your own pace. I think that is the type of MMO that I want to play. And I've seen a number of MMOs sort of embrace this to varying degrees, and seeing a lot of success with it. But I have certainly found that when I can progress at my own pace and do my own thing, I think that the War Within is doing a good job of providing that kind of experience with delves, with the warband system, and other things that you can do out in the world. It's nice. And then when I have opportunities to group up with people, it tends to be a more positive experience. And so that's what I think about the future of MMOs, why I value solo content so much more now. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are on this subject in the comments below. If you like this video, feel free to like it and share it, and that would also help me out a lot. But with all that being said, thank you guys for hearing what I have to say about this, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button, and feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.